In the world of cyberpunk, mega corporations rule by force and intimidation. They will do anything to hold on to and increase their power, even if that means launching an outright war. The Second Corporate War was a large-scale conflict between two of the largest producers of Ju-2, Petrochem and Sovoil. Ju-2 is the fuel of the future and has essentially replaced gasoline as the leading combustible fuel source for the 21st century, powering over 90% of all vehicles and combustible engines. As world supplies began to dwindle, many petrochemical corporations started looking towards plants to formulate a new source of fuel. One such company was Biotechnica. Biotechnica's industry is in genetic engineering. Instead of looking towards natural plant-based solution, Biotechnica genetically engineered T. vulgaris megasavis, a high-sugar grain that is grown into a synthetic wheat, the essential ingredient in creating Ju-2, the fuel of the future. Although Biotechnica held the patent for T. vulgaris megasavis, Biotechnica lacked the resources needed to mass refine the crop, mainly land to grow the wheat, since most, if not all, the land was already owned by mega agriculture corporations. So instead, Biotechnica licensed their patent to Petrochemical Associates International, and later, Soviet World Oil Industries. Petrochemical Associates International, or Petrochem for short, is a mega corporation who primarily focuses in the petrochemical industry, agriculture, and also has large-scale investments in the weapon industry. However, Petrochem's bread and butter is Ju-2, the fuel of the future, and they are responsible for 60% of the world's supply. Petrochem's main headquarters is based in Dallas, Texas, but they also have offices in major cities around the globe, including Night City. Petrochem has over 400,000 employees, 50,000 troops, and 1,800 coverts. Soviet World Industries, or Sovoil for short, is the world leader in oil recovery and refining, extensive mining, heavy industry, and power transmission interests. Sovoil's main headquarters is located in Moscow, with regional offices across the globe, including Night City. Sovoil has over 800,000 employees, 150,000 troops, and 50,000 secret police. In the year 2006, Biotechnica licensed their special patent to Sovoil. Even though Sovoil's refinement process was inferior to Petrochem's, and the crops didn't grow as well in Central Asia as it does in North America, with so much land, Sovoil quickly became responsible for producing 30% of the world's supply. Even though Petrochem had a majority hold on Ju-2 production, it started to look at drilling sites in the east, both in Russia, but most importantly in the South China Sea. At first, Petrochem offered to supply Sovoil with updated technology to help drill, pump, and create other fuels from untapped oil resources in Siberia. But at the same time, Petrochem was secretly looking to procure exclusive drilling rights in the South China Sea, where the world's largest remaining oil reserves are located. Sovoil found out and devoted all of its resources preventing this from happening, and soon announced that they developed new drilling technology that made a deal between them and Petrochem unnecessary. The Second Corporate War started when Sabina Bravo, an offshore drilling platform owned by Petrochem, exploded. Petrochem blamed Sovoil for planting an explosive device on their platform, which Sovoil quickly denied. This led to an extensive public verbal battle between representatives from both companies. After public and private communications broke down, Petrochem launched the first military attack on Sovoil. Petrochem sought revenge, an eye for an eye, so Petrochem ordered their military divers to plant explosive devices on one of Sovoil's platforms. The platform was destroyed, and as a result, full-scale war between both companies broke out. On April 8, 2008, the Second Corporate War had officially begun, as Sovoil aircraft struck simultaneously at several Petrochem platforms and pipelines. Sovoil's strikes were effective and Petrochem's local operations were crippled. Within hours, Petrochem's military commanders authorized a retaliatory strike. The first few weeks of fighting were the fiercest for two reasons. First, both Petrochem and Sovoil were at their military peak, with fresh troops, wide range of equipment and supplies. And second, the opening weeks was the time when both companies had great number of assets to strike at. Not only did both corporations fight for territory, but they also destroyed each other's expensive equipment, bases, platforms, hotels, infrastructure, terminals, pipelines, and refineries. As the war spread from targets in the South China Sea to land-based facilities, governments scrambled to react. Sentiments changed from trying to peacefully negotiate to exacting retribution for corporate attacks on their territories. The Malaysian government announced that it was going to abandon the Unified Peace Front and instead put its full support behind Petrochem, which will base its operations out of Malaysia. The Philippines and Vietnam put their full support behind Sovoil since it was promising to base their operations on their soil. With most of the physical damage done, fighting changed from deep strikes aimed at facilities to the physical control of the spready Apalacho. Troops from both sides fought island to island across the seas and skies to advance their area of control. Within a year of fighting, Petrochem was starting to struggle. First, Petrochem only had the backing of one nation, while Sovoil had the backing of two. And second, the Soviet Union was half the distance of the United States, where the full force of Petrochem's power is located. Month after month, Petrochem's forces gave up control of islands and waterways, essential to the security of the Spratly Apalacho. But in a surprise counterattack, Petrochem's naval forces were able to seize control of a chain of islands, which was followed by surgical airstrikes against key Sovoil bases in Vietnam. Soon after, Petrochem's spies learned of a secret inspection visit by the leader of Sovoil. During flight, Petrochem's interceptors engaged fighters protecting Sovoil's corporate aircraft. After a short firefight, all aircraft belonging to Sovoil, including that of their leader, plunged into the ocean. There were no survivors. This turn of events shook Sovoil to its core. Confusion and purges of top leadership followed in order to find out who gave up the secret. Attempting to capitalize on Sovoil's temporary disarray, Petrochem saw this as an opportunity to strike hard and end the war. Petrochem ordered a massive attack on all fronts. Unfortunately, Sovoil predicted the time and place these strikes would occur. Most of the strikes were failures, which showed that Sovoil was still very much under control. After this disastrous failure, Petrochem would never get the chance to win the war. Sovoil's full southern forces began a 9-month advance that would end only when Petrochem's forces conceded defeat and evacuated the South China Sea. Although there was no formal surrender, Petrochem's leader came to the realization that continuing this war can lead to the very destruction of their corporation. As a result, Sovoil seized control of all the oil resources in the South China Sea and has remained in control ever since. Petrochem spent 2 years recovering from the war. Stock prices and cash reserves bottomed out, and their military was depleted. Still, with the help of Ju 2, Petrochem was able to recover and remains a major corporate power on the world stage. Even though Sovoil was the unofficial victor, they too were suffering after the war. They lost a great deal of manpower, equipment, plus billions of dollars poured into the effort. However, Sovoil was now in control of the remaining oil supplies in the South China Sea, and in a masterful stroke of diplomacy, Sovoil mended fences with Malaysia, re-establishing commercial relationships, and signing a deal to build refineries and other facilities on their land. It wasn't long before Sovoil began to pump oil out of the South China Seas, and company stocks began to rise to new heights. Although the Second Corporate War was over, the after effects still remained. Smaller petrochemical companies who operated in the South China Sea before war broke out were furious with both corporations, but were too small to do anything about it. Even now, the South China Sea is the most polluted body of water on Earth, devastating entire sea economies, including fishing and tourism. Tension between Petrochem and Sovoil still remain high, and once again they are exploring for oil reserves in the same region, Antarctica. Nobody knows if this will lead to another war. Some believe that both corporations have already learned their lesson from the Second Corporate War.